Since my last video on this channel did so well that Rops DM'd me on Twitter asking about it and Valve removed nullbinds from the game, I'm assuming that a lot of rich, handsome, smart, and successful people are watching this channel with 140 IQ. So if you're one of those people, leave a like on this video. I thought that I'd just go into a bit more statistics on this channel because I find a lot of these things pretty interesting even though I don't do it as a job. I think real world data actually puts a lot of things into perspective. You know, we can talk as much about theory as we want in Counter-Strike or in any video game, but real world data is really where it's at. And since I don't have Valve's library of data available to me, and especially not data based on overtime statistics and matchmaking, I thought I'd do something with pro games to show how overtime is actually insanely broken. So I'm going to use IEM Cologne for this example because Blast isn't completed yet, and this is a larger pool of data. And the reason I'm doing this analysis is because when I was looking at HLTV statistics databases for map win percentages, CT versus T win percentages, I noticed that they don't distinguish between overtime win rates for every map. And I think it's important to remember that overtime is something that a lot of players don't experience who don't play Face It. You know, there's only one overtime in Premier, but it ends immediately if it ties again at 15-15, right? So you can't have infinite overtimes. But I found it pretty hard to actually find the overtime statistics. I bet HLTV could implement it in the future pretty easily, but it just seems like they haven't for whatever reason. So some tournaments will use 16K start money for overtime, some will use 10K, some will use 12.5K. But I think the thing that people forget is that the game is balanced around economy. We're not playing a game where you spawn with the same money every single round, obviously, and you have different equipment. The team has different equipment. Both teams have different equipment, right? On every single round, you're not going to have a perfect full buy just based on how the game actually works. But in overtime, each team has a perfect full buy almost every single round, right? You can almost do double ops every round if you save, or you can afford to buy an op. Somebody drops an op and everybody has full utility, full guns, etc., etc., etc. But I think what's important to remember is that the game's current win percentage for Ts and CTs is balanced around this economy imbalance that always happens in every game. So the overall win percentage accounts for eco rounds, pistol rounds, full buys, anti-eco, anti-force, all that stuff. So if we look at the actual rounds of every single round played, it's actually in the T's favor. It's 53.42% round win for T's and 46.58% for CTs out of almost 1,500 rounds. But what I think is crazy to look at is if you look at overtime statistics, it's a 60.92 win percentage for CTs and 39.08 for T's out of 87 rounds. And again, this is where people who know a lot about statistics are going to start typing in the comments about how this data is completely wrong and it's useless. But I think it's really important to look at because these are the only OT rounds that we have to look at. And so what we can do now is if we take the win rate of CTs over the course of the entire game, at this tournament specifically, which was 46.58%, we can generate a graph that looks like this. And what this graph is showing are all of the possible outcome probabilities for each scenario of how many rounds the CTs will win in overtime based on that win rate. So if we look right in the middle, the most likely outcomes are that the CTs are going to win 40 or 41 rounds out of the 87 played based on this win rate, right? And if we just do a simple calculation of 46% times 87, we get 40.5 rounds, which is right in the middle here, right? So obviously it's chopped up into 1 round per 1 round. There's no half rounds that you can win, so it's going to be like this. But so we can think of this as the distribution of outcomes, right? And the probability that that outcome is going to happen out of all of the possible outcomes. You know, maybe the CTs win 0 rounds, and it's obviously not shown on the graph, but it's way off here, super unlikely. Or the CTs win every single round, it's super unlikely. But that analysis is based on if the win rate is 46%. And so what we can do is we can plot the exact point in the probability that this outcome occurs specifically, which is at 53 rounds right here. And the chance of that happening is 0.239%. And typically in statistics, in academic studies and high school things and whatnot, whenever you do statistics, usually if you have a value that is less than 0.05, that means something significant is happening, right? We can actually start making assumptions about it. We can make guesses, we can make theories. But if it's greater than 0.5 chance of happening, you know, it's probably not, like it might be up to random chance. You know, it could have been off just a few rounds going the way that they shouldn't have. But I think that this value points out a lot about how overtime is just completely not balanced compared to the rest of the game. And I think a lot of players who just stick to matchmaking and just play casually and, you know, just watch pro games like for the fun of it, for the entertainment, they don't experience this problem of the CTs just winning every single round, you know? And I think if you only play a few overtime games, you know, maybe a month, right, on Face It or something, you probably haven't even noticed this because they're so rare, right? Most games are just one in regulation. But I think Valve should really take a look at this and see if overtime can be rebalanced to be more of a 50-50, right? Because, it should be fair. There is something to be said that the team that starts on CT side might have an advantage, if they win 3 rounds mentally going into the next half, where they might just win the next T round just off momentum alone. But I think it's fairly impressive to look at the game and see how balanced it really is just across so many rounds and all the maps. Some maps like Vertigo at IEM Cologne have like a 60% T round win rate, but I think that can be chalked up to low map numbers. But when we look at all of the rounds individually, I think it paints a pretty good picture of the problem here. So since overtime uses the exact same rules for loss bonus as the normal game does, the regulation rounds do, I think Valve might want to take a look at changing the loss/win money for each team, maybe starting, something along those lines, right? I don't have an exact solution right now because I'm not a game developer and I can't run these rules for myself to test it out. But let me know what you guys think about this data in the comments. YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy the next video, so you should click it as soon as possible. Click the video. Click the video or your next 5 games will be losses, I promise. If you click this video, you'll win 100% of the next games that you play for the next 5 years.